Okay, this is 8.2. Resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville approving the 2012 annual report submitted by the Emeryville Transportation Management Association, TMA, and levying the citywide property-based business improvement district PID assessment for fiscal year 2013-2014. Karen?
Wiggle this every couple minutes. It doesn't go dark. Come on, Karen. No, there's no transportation committee. Oh, I need a cup of coffee.
Good evening, Council. So tonight, the Council is asked to consider 3 actions. One is approving the Emeryville Transportation Management Association's 2012 annual report. 2 is to set a PBID, the Citywide Property-Based Improvement District Assessment Levy for fiscal year 2013-14, and these are funds that would be used for the EMERY GO ROUND service year of 2014. And the 3rd requested action is to consider whether to provide city funds to the EMERY GO ROUND for service year 2014. And if the Council chooses to do so, it would require an appropriation from the city's general fund reserve, and if Council directed staff to do so, we would come back in September with that appropriation legislation. So annual report highlights. For the 2012 service year, and I should first have mentioned that we have with us members of the TMA, the executive director, not of the TMA, the executive director, Gray Bowen, the organization that is executive of the TMA. We have people with us from there in case you have any questions. And we also have Jeff Sears, who is on the TMA board. So for the 2012 service year, the total expenditures were roughly $2.88 million from the PBID itself, with a total revenue of about and the total expenditure, reverse that. Total expenditures were $2.88 million, with the total revenue being $2.82 million, which is within about 2% of the budget. And I'll just note that for the past few years, 2011 and 2012, the service has been running at a slight deficit, but it's within about 2 to 4% of the total. So that is able to be covered or by operating contingencies. The ridership for several years has been flat at 1.3 million, but in 2012, the ridership jumped to 1.5 million boardings per year.
Check out the dollars.
Yes, I just saw that. No matter how many times you thought you'd prove it. The TMA added 2 new shuttle buses and added service to the Shell Mound Powell route. They also met new air district emission standards. They issued a request for proposal for a new shuttle operator and new maintenance contract. And they continued an operations contract for both the 8-to-go dial-a-ride paratransit service conducted by the Senior Center, and is also the West Berkeley shuttle services. For 2013, their goals and priorities was to establish the new bus operator, who's now up and running, and there's been some route efficiencies already having been made through that bus operator. To conduct a route analysis to determine exactly where some of the service capacity issues are. To conduct a fleet analysis. The fleet of the EMERY GO ROUND is aging, and that is a problem with growing maintenance. To work on maintaining a 10 to 15 minute peak and a 15 to 20 minute off-peak service level, and to address the real-time notification software issues, which they have started, I think have solved at this point. Future challenges include the continuing search for a long-term bus ride. We have recently received some information from Caltrans that they are interested in leasing to the city the property under the 580 underpass near San Pablo. And they'll be getting back to us on some initial parameters for what a lease might look like. And we would also be looking at what the tenant improvements would be needed as part of that potential long-range plan. And we will be working with the TMA about this and keep the council informed. And the other challenge is the ongoing ridership capacity demands. Bless you. So the TMA has requested for 13 and 14 that the council increase the PBID 2.5% over last year. And they also requested that in order then that the city also provide $250,000 for the EMERY GO ROUND service for 2014. That is because the budget that would be generated, the revenue that would be generated by this 2.5% increase is a bit less than the total revenue needed to cover expenditures in order to expand service to meet the capacity issues that have cropped up in the past year. So the proposed service year budget is $2.97 million. To give you some sense of the difference between the current and the 2.5 increase, this is attached to your packet. Just to let you know that currently, with the current revenue projected, if there was no increase in the PBID, there would be about a $329,000 deficit. With a 2.5%, that's about a $258,000 deficit. The alternatives are, as I said, the TMA has requested $250,000 from the city. Alternatively, the TMA does have some cash reserves of about $50,000. It has been the city's policy that, $500,000. It has been the city policy that the TMA should have at least a 7% operating reserve. The TMA board's policy is a 7 to 10% operating contingency reserve, so that's about 200 to 300,000 of that $500,000. And just to reiterate, the TMA has operated a slight deficit since the 2011 service year, mostly due to fluctuating fuel, the maintenance cost that was referenced before, and trying to meet increased service demand by being able to, for example, press into service the spare buses when they're not needed for maintenance. So the City Council's options are are just in terms of the PBID assessment levy, is to approve the TMA request, which is for the 2.5 PBID levy. Alternatively, the council is able to make a different assessment. It is the council does not have to abide by the TMA's request, and so the alternatives would be to keep the assessment levy as it is now. If you look at just some of the options, the council could increase the levy as much as 12.5%. The management plan that was adopted by the city and that was also had gone through a Prop 218 process by the commercial property owners that are affected, allow the PBID to be increased 5% a year, but on a cumulative basis. So, for example, because the PBID really has not increased more than about 2.7% per year, there is the ability for the council to act to pass as much of a 2.5% increase. That amount of increase would essentially eliminate the structural deficit. However, in the past, the PBID has never been raised by the City Council either differently than the recommendation of the TMA or above a 5%, which is kind of what's considered kind of the annual cap. And this would, as you can see, would result in about a $187,000 deficit. And we previously talked about the 2.5% and the keeping rates current as last year. So the TMA has requested $250,000 to expand the EMERY GO ROUND, and this is essentially based upon a 2.5% PBID increase that would cover some expansion of service. The city options are to fully fund the TMA request, to fund some part of that request, or to not provide funds. Any provided funds, as I said before, would have to be appropriated from the city's general fund reserve, and the TMA has the ability to use cash reserves net of operating contingency to continue to fulfill the budget that they proposed. There have been some incursions on that cash reserve recently, though. For example, recently they had a mold issue with their office trailer and had to replace the trailer. So that impacts some of their ability to potentially expand service as much as they would like to if they just had to use cash reserves. Of course, alternatively, they could just reduce their budget and not do the projected service demands. So summary is, again, there are 3 things that the council is being asked to do, and one is to approve the TMA annual report. You've all got copies of that in your packet. 2, to set the assessment, and 3, to consider whether to provide city funds to the EMERY Go Round shuttle for service year 2014, and if so, to direct staff to prepare the necessary proposed legislation for council action in September. And that's my report.
Mayor Brinkman, I just wanted to add one last thing there. We are also planning on coming back to the City Council in the fall, as I think already scheduled, to look at the long-term funding strategy for the PBID. So there'll be additional analysis that we'll bring back to a study session.
Okay. So any council members have any questions?
I'd like to hear from the public.
Okay. Public, please come up. If you don't mind queuing behind Ken, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Ken Bukowski, Emeryville Property Owners Association. At our last meeting this past week, the property owners unanimously voted that they will oppose any increase in the assessment. If we look at the Emery Go Round, and I never looked at it from the property owner side before, this whole thing was really set up as being unfair. You had the 7 largest users who had shuttles. The city put them together to provide a bus, and then they provided that most of the property owners in town would pay for it. Well, the 7 largest owners still have probably the majority of the people using the bus and the public. And a lot of these owners don't have any increases in their businesses, but yet they have to pay annual increases. And property owners unanimously don't feel that the assessments are legal. They don't meet the test under 218 to provide the specific benefit that the law requires. And when you say you want, okay, you need more money for increased service, well, where is that increased service? There is no ridership analysis. You have a Hollis route and you have a PAL route, and one route has service on the weekend, the other one doesn't, so you have disparate benefits. And I would recommend that you go forward with the levy without an increase, because if it is challenged and it's determined to be unlawful, then the whole thing could be thrown out. And we do need to work for a long-term funding solution, because it's doubtful that the PBID could ever be approved again. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Sears.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Jeff Sears with Wareham Development. I'm currently the president of the TMA. I was president back when it first formed its PBID. I've been on the board for over a decade. The EMERY Go Round is a great success story for the city, and we want that to continue. And we'd love to be able to do that without asking for your help, but you helped us at the birth. I wasn't even here, so I have to give you all credit for that, or as a body. And we need a little help again. And so the system is stressed because it's been successful. You heard Karen tell you that ridership's up 15%, and that's up without a lot of, additional sources of payers into the system. We haven't had a lot of new developments. Our company built one, and it added a payer into the system, but there haven't been a lot of others in the last 5 years. So the only source of revenue growth is increasing the levy, mostly. And we take that very seriously, because there are a lot of people who are very anxious about that levy growing every year. But our costs grow every year. We have labor, we have union labor drivers. We have gas, and so you all probably use the gas pumps. Even though we have diesel and other types of vehicles, it's expensive. So costs go up even to keep the exact number of buses and drivers on the road. But we need more because the ridership's up, and we're not just trying to increase service to make every bus half full. We have had the inability to have people get on the bus, and a lot of employees and other people who use the system have complained a lot in the last 6 months. So that's what brings us here. We're sort of responding to the inability to carry everybody who wants. And if the system starts to degrade, people opt out, and they're going to find other ways. Now, maybe that's transit, but it could be a lot of cars and more traffic, and you start working against all the successes. So that's what we're here asking for. The levy increase was hotly debated at the board. We're really trying to take everyone's voices and thoughts into consideration. There were people who wanted to go 5, there were people who wanted to go 0, and we sort of split the baby trying to recognize both. And that's never an ideal solution, but it's what we came up with and what the board's recommending. But we need some help to keep it being successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Any other public comment? Okay, council, I do have, oh, yes, Jen.
Well, I have a question, and maybe this would go to the operators. When you talk about expanding service, I just want to know what that means, what that would look like to riders. Is it more frequency? Is it later or earlier hours? Is it larger buses? Is it expanded routes? Can someone talk about what the expansion looks like and what that would mean?
Hi, I'm Ronnie Hattrip. I'll answer the question. What we're looking at is increased routes, different service areas. Right now, we're operating one Hollis line. Before it was split as a north and south, and we're experiencing a lot of overcrowding on the south end. So in order to split that route again, we would need additional buses and additional drivers. We have 5 right now, we would need 6. In addition to that, we would look at adding service to the Shell Mound area as well. So Shell Mound PAL line is also very crowded. Our whole service is very crowded right now, so it would be adding drivers and adding buses to just add service overall and balance the system better.
So would someone wait less long for a bus, or they would be able to get on the bus because it wouldn't be so full?
We wouldn't experience overcrowding.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Well, I have to tell you, Charlie and Hemphill and Sabrina and I had a meeting with Pete's Coffee this week, and Pete's Coffee was actually thinking about moving out of Emeryville as far as the corporate headquarters. They had looked at Berkeley and they had looked at Alameda, where their factory is. And Pete's came back and said, you know, it's one of the tough things is if we were to leave, we wouldn't have the EMERY go round in Alameda or Berkeley. And it was one of the driving forces when they listened to their employees saying that we either like riding our bikes to work or we like just come and work on the EMERY go round. So it's really, when you think about what it does for the city, it does a lot, especially keeping Pete's Coffee in town, and they're excited about staying here. So we have a lot of employees that want this service, and so I would entertain a motion on this item to approve the report. And my motion would be to put 2.5% increase, and at this time, nothing from the city coffers into it, but to allow the TMA to withdraw $250,000 out of the reserves. That'd be my motion.
Would you accept a friendly amendment?
I would, always from you, Nora.
On the motion, can we include the approval of the annual report?
That was my first one.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, are you also approving the assessment level for 2013-14?
Up to 2.5.
Okay. And then, rather than say to the PBID that they should do X, Y, Z, can we perhaps approve both the annual report and the PBID assessment, and then come back in September, I believe you said, Sabrina, and then we take a look at whether or not the city has the ability and wishes to add some money to it. Hold that over, and let's see what the PBID does with their Plan B.
Well, I guess what I'm just saying, I wanted the flexibility for them to have a Plan B with the reserves, which
Well,
I guess they would have
do that.
anyway. Yeah,
They would have that.
so,
So
but
that's
with-
a friendly amendment.
okay, I would assume,
I'd second it.
okay.
I have a further question that I failed to ask. Are the buses owned or leased when you talk about maintenance costs?
Come up to the mic.
We want to make you famous, so you have to come up
We're
here and join us.
broadcasting.
We have sort of a mixed fleet. We have a few loans that we have on 2 of our buses. We have about 4 leased buses, and the rest of our buses of 6, we have a fleet of 16, the remaining buses that we currently own.
And so the maintenance costs you're talking about are in the ones you own?
Yes. Well, actually, our lease terms on most of our leases, we are in charge of the maintenance,
Okay.
unfortunately.
And then my second question is that we do finally have some new properties coming online in Emeryville, and presumably those would be new revenues into the TMA as well. And has that been factored into the budget that we're looking at?
Can you answer that?
Yeah. To give a little perspective, a 100,000 square foot building generates about less than $26,000 per year, and that may be enough to pay for the actual driving of the bus, but it's not enough to pay for the leasing of the bus. And that's been one of the issues that I think that Jeff Sears was alluding to, is that the increase, the new properties that have come online in the past 5 years have not provided the additional revenue to actually lease additional equipment in addition to just adding service, the driver hours. So for example, if you have a 100,000 square foot building and they're only generating 26,000, and let's say you've got 40 new employees using the EMERY GO ROUND, that could require a new bus. And the cost of that development, isn't enough for that.
So do you know what the new revenues are anticipated to be for I'm thinking of the 3 residences
Not
that are
off the
being
top
built?
of my head, but it's, I think it's 120, it's 120, see, I have this slide, but it is 100, with a 2.5% increase, it's $127.70 per unit. So again, it doesn't really generate a whole lot of money when something new comes online. So unless there's been a very large development, like we've had some 1 million square foot developments come online, we've not really put that in, because really what it does, it just provides a little bit more flexibility to, for example, put a spare bus into service. It really doesn't give you the ability to really add service.
And if I may, Karen, I don't think that the budget would also factor in the additional expense that would be associated with those additional riders either, would it? That hasn't been taken into account, so neither the
absorbed.
revenues or the expenditures.
Right, and
Thank
so that's been another issue with the ridership capacity, is that, that you have these additional riders, but you don't, it's been difficult to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Brinkman, in terms of coming back in September and really analyzing this, I think we have to look very, very hard at this, quote, expansion of service or ridership capacity issues. We need not anecdotal information, we need some hard figures on this. And we need, when you talk about trying to meet increased service demands, we are all faced with strictures in our budgeting. So we have to look very carefully about, we have a sum of money, this is the service that we can provide. And I'd like to just take a hard look at that. The other thing I'd like to take a look at, I believe we talked about the Caltrans negotiating for that property between 35th and 36th Street in San Pablo and Adeline. Is that the property you're talking about, or is it under the distribution structure for the bus yard?
It's the one that you just referenced,
It's the one what?
on San Paulo between 35th and 36th.
All right, I want to express real caution here. Perhaps we don't remember when the Emery Go Round had a bus yard over off of Ocean Avenue in the Baker Metal Yard. And we are going to be right next to this new development and some very angry older residents that have been there. So that is not, the distribution structure is really the best place. But we must tread very carefully when we think about having a bus yard right next to all those new units and our other citizens who've lived there.
Yeah.
So that's something we want to bring forward for consideration. I call the question on the two.
Okay, so we had a first and a second. Why don't you do roll call vote?
Sure. Councilmember Atkin.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember West.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Asher.
Aye.
And Mayor Brinkman.
Aye. Okay, moving on.